Hello, this is a brief presentation of our free HUD versions. So, this is our first and main HUD panel. Totally, the HUD consists of 3 main HUD panels, which you can navigate through the so-called HUD tabs, like here. So this is a very cool feature of Hand2Note, which allows you to show or to keep the HUD very straightforward and avoid autopiloting by too much stats used. You might be overwhelmed. Alright, so let's briefly present the content. The first HUD panel consists of the first line, which is the player name. Then we have the sample size in red color, which is 4.58 million hand histories. The second line is the VPIP of 36, followed by the PFR of 18. Then there's a purple separator for preflop 3-betting and fold against 3-bets preflop. Then we click on the second HUD panel for positional RFI. RFI is the abbreviation for raise first in. And the second HUD tab shows positional RFIs. So for early position, middle position, hijack, cutoff and button. And then it's said it's common at the moment that the small blind uses a mixed strategy. You can use, or you can see the small blind limp frequency first in and the small blind raise frequency first in. So this player here is open limping the small blind of 19%. And open raising the small blind of 35%. Now we have a look on the third HUD panel, which is a panel for postflop. As the blue description shows for flop, turn and river. And the HUD panel content is for c-betting. So it's showing how often the player is c-betting the flop and fold against c-bets on the flop. Likewise for turns and rivers. Then comes the separator, which shows the total AF, which is the total aggression factor. And showdown info for when to showdown and win showdown. Okay, as you might already have seen, there are some pop-ups additionally linked to the stats. So depending on your Hand2Note settings, you either hover or click on a statistic, like I will do now. So we hover or click on the first stat, which is the VPIP stat, and on it there's a VPIP stat pop-up linked. So once you hover or click on it, you can use some extended VPIP or somewhat related statistics to VPIP. For example, the positional VPIPs or limps, or how the player is limp responding against raises. Same applies for RFI, so you can see positional RFI numbers and you can even compare it with open jams. And you can see how the player is totally responding against re-raises by looking on the fold against 3-bet tab. Line. Call 3-bet and 4-bet after raise first in. Then you can use the 3-bet pop-up, fold against 3-bet pop-ups. then we again look on the second HUD panel and we look on the Statpopups there, so we can see how often this player is open, jamming and raise first in from this particular position. I guess that's really useful. Same for post-flop. We can see the whole frequency of c-bets. We can briefly see the, in Hand2Note, so-called post-flop diagram, which is the colored bar here. This allows you to see the post-flop board composition. So when we hover over it, we can see the composition. One second. Sample size is simply too huge. Yeah, you can see how often or which with which board categories this villain is developing his c-bet strategy. So you can see how often he is c-betting sets, over pairs, top pair, weak kicker, top pair, good kickers, low pairs, middle pairs, yada yada yada. And some extended statistics like c-bet in position, c-bet out of position, multi-way c-betting, and how this player is responding against raises. So how often he is bet folding, bet calling, bet raises. You can see this likely for turn and rivers. But one additional cool feature here is that you can hover or click on the sizing, hands and notes, and some sub pop-ups are appearing here. So here you can see which c-bet sizing this player is using and their post-flop board card category compositions. So this shows here that the most frequent bet size this player used is 40 to 60% of the bet size. You can see this because the 24 is the highest statistic here, followed by 20 to 40% c-betting by 13% and 60 to 80% by 12%. Lines like betting more than 150% of the pot is the most uncommon statistic here, which is of course quite logic because it's such a high bet sizing. Then you can see some example hands here of c-betting. And you are able to write some notes. For example, is c-betting with air hands and pot size betting on flop. Alright, then I want to show you the Statpopups for folds against c-bets, which are the built-in Statpopups of Hand2Note itself, which are here the Hand2Note Edge Statpopups, which you need to purchase if you want to use those ones, because there are no fold against c-bet pop-ups linked here, like I have shown before. This is the total AF stat pop-up, so you can see the flop, turn, river and total AF frequencies. Then you can see some river informations like win showdown, IP, and out of position. When to showdown, when won, when saw flop. How often this player is betting the river and winning it. How often he is calling the river and winning it. How often he is raising the river and winning it. So that you can do some exploits and overfolding maybe here, because when you see a super high frequency of winning here, this is mostly an indicator that this villain is underbluffing river raises. Yeah, this is a feature of Hand2Note Edge or similar subscriptions, which allows to use a stat pop-up for each stat if you want to do so. So this is not part of my Hand2Note FREE HUD product, but of Hand2Note itself. So you can use my FREE HUD way more extended if you have a subscription for Hand2Note. You need to pay for it. That's the contra point. But you have access to much more data. For example, here we have a look on the raise c-bet against bets, and we simply see that the whole range composition is almost consisting of 2 pairs and better hands, and less than 5% of real air hands, so ace high, trash hands, and overcard hands. This is such a super strong range here. We have to keep this in mind.